Hello students, in today's tutorial we will be covering the basics of ptosis management and a few ptosis surgeries. Now ptosis, as we all know, it is defined as a state of drooping of one or both of the upper eyelids when the eyes are in primary gaze. So now the management of ptosis is divided into two types. We have a non-surgical management which basically consists of rehabilitative crutch glasses. These are special eyeglasses which have crutches attached to them, which will lift the upper eyelids. The second part of your management is a surgical management, and this is the definitive treatment for ptosis. So there is a lot which goes on in deciding which type of surgery to be performed for ptosis and when the surgery should be performed. So that is the decision making of ptosis. So firstly, we will consider when to operate a patient. And so firstly, when the patient has cosmetic concerns. So when the indication is cosmetic, it can be operated at any age. The second concern is when the patient is amblyopic. That is, the eyelid is covering the eye and blocking the visual pathway. So this will require early surgery so as to preserve the vision of the patient. Another consideration is the associated abnormalities in the eye, such as squint, blepharophimosis, telecanthus, epicanthus. Now, all these conditions have to be operated first before you operate the patient for ptosis. Now, the next important part of decision making is which procedure has to be performed. So, the primary factor which helps us decide which surgery to perform is the levator function. Now, a test is performed to assess the levator function, and it is basically the amount of upper eyelid excursion from extreme down gaze to extreme up gaze with the frontalis blocked. So now the levator function is then classified as excellent when the levator function is 13 to 15 millimeters. It is good when the levator function is 8 to 12 millimeters. It is fair or average when it is 5 to 7 millimeters, and the levator function is considered poor when it is 4 millimeters or less. So depending on the grading of the levator function, we decide which procedure is to be performed. Now, as I already discussed, the decision of the type of surgery to be performed depends on the levator function. And in addition to the levator function, it also depends on the degree of ptosis. Now let us see the surgeries which are performed based on the levator function. So now when the levator function is more than 10 millimeters and the degree of ptosis is less than 2 millimeters, then you will perform the Fasanella Servat procedure, also known as tarsoconjunctivomulerectomy. Next, when the levator function is more than 10 millimeters, but the degree of ptosis is more than 2 millimeters, then you will perform the aponeurosis surgery. Now, when the levator function is less than 10 millimeters, again, this is divided into two categories. When it is less than 10 millimeters but more than 4 millimeters, then the surgery performed is a levator resection or a levator plication. And when the levator function is less than 10 millimeters but less than 4 millimeters as well, that is a very poor levator function, then the surgery which is performed is a frontalis brow suspension surgery. Now, the first surgery which we will be discussing is the modified Fasanella Servat procedure. So, this procedure is useful for mild ptosis with a good levator function. And this surgery involves shortening of the molar muscle and the upper part of the tarsus. Now, this surgery will give best results up to 2 millimeters of congenital ptosis with minimum 10 millimeters of levator action. A 2 millimeter tarsectomy is performed for every 1 millimeter of ptosis. This surgery is used for mild neurogenic or myogenic ptosis and residual ptosis following levator resection procedure. The anesthesia required for this surgery is local or can also be performed under general anesthesia. Now coming to the surgical steps of the Fasinella Servate procedure. So the first step, the upper eyelid is averted using a Desmarais retractor, and curved hemostats are applied to include the desired amount of tarsus and the conjunctiva molars complex. This is followed by three 4-0 traction sutures which are applied at the upper border of the tarsal plate. The next step involves marking the tarsus along the line of excision with a monopolar cautery. Then the required amount of tarsal resection is marked over the everted tarsus, staying parallel to the eyelid margin. This is then followed by full thickness excision of the tarsus. Now in the next step, the skin suture is placed with 6-0 catgut at the medial end of the tarsal excision, and the needle is then brought out on the conjunctival side to close the tarsal wound. Thus the tarsal wound is closed with 6-0 continuous catgut sutures. And finally, the suture end is exteriorized on to the eyelid skin at the lateral end for tying of the final knot. Now the next procedure which we will be discussing is the levator resection. And we will be discussing the transcutaneous approach or the Everbush operation. Firstly, starting with the anesthesia. So a frontal nerve block is the preferred local anesthesia in adults, whereas general anesthesia is required in children. Now starting with the surgical steps. The upper eyelid crease incision is marked, maintaining symmetry with the contralateral eye. Traction is then applied to the upper eyelid with the aid of a 4-0 silk suture. And after the traction sutures have been placed, the skin incision is then placed. Now in the next step, the orbicularis muscle is separated in order to expose the orbital septum. And after the orbital septum has been exposed, further dissection is done in order to expose the superior tarsal plate. Next, the orbital septum is incised to expose the pre-aponeurotic fat pad and the levator aponeurosis. So the levator aponeurosis is identified as a shining white layer just under the pre-aponeurotic fat. Next, the conjunctiva is lifted away from the levator aponeurosis by subconjunctival injection of xylocaine. Then 4-0 silk traction sutures are passed through the levator aponeurosis at its insertion. The levator aponeurosis is then disinserted and separated from the underlying molar conjunctiva by blunt dissection. The medial and the lateral horns are also cut if necessary. Then 3 cardinal sutures are passed from the tarsus through the levator muscle at the desired height. The sutures are then tightened with a temporary knot to achieve the predetermined lid height and the natural contour of the lid. Also, placement of upper eyelid sutures during surgery is done based on the levator action. Following the previous steps, the redundant stump of aponeurosis is then excised. The lid crease is then formed with 3 interrupted 6-0 vicryl sutures which are passed through the orbicularis muscle, and it should also include the levator stump. And finally, the skin is then closed with 6-0 Prolene continuous sutures. Next, we will move on to the frontalis sling surgery, also known as the tarsofrontalis sling procedure. So now this surgery is the ideal procedure for bilateral moderate to severe ptosis, and the main criteria is that it is done only when the levator function is very poor. Now this surgery can also be performed unilaterally in very rare situations. The situations under which it can be done unilaterally are following levator excision for Marcus gun phenomenon and when there is severe unilateral ptosis with a very poor levator action. Now, over the years, many different materials have been tried for this surgery, such as autologous fascia lata, silk, Prolene, Gore-Tex sutures, polyester, silicone rods, and variable results are obtained. But nowadays, the most commonly used materials are firstly non-absorbable synthetic materials such as 3,0 ethibond sutures and 3,0 Prolene sutures. Secondly, autologous fascia lata or temporalis fascia, and this is generally the best sling material. And lastly, it is also performed using a silicone rod. Now, this surgery is generally performed under local anesthesia for adults, whereas it is performed under general anesthesia for children. So, this surgery involves two types of incisions. Firstly, we have eyelid incisions, and secondly, we have brow incisions. So, the first step involves marking of these incisions before the incisions are taken. So the eyelid incisions are marked over the upper eyelid 1 centimeter apart and 3 to 4 millimeters from the lash line. They are marked at the level of the lateral canthus and the medial canthus. This is followed by marking of the brow incisions. So there are three brow incisions. We have a central brow incision, a lateral brow incision, and a medial brow incision. So firstly, the central brow incision is taken 10 to 12 millimeters above the superior border of the eyebrow, and the lateral and the medial brow incisions are marked above the eyebrows in line with the lateral and the medial canthus. So now after the incisions have been marked, the stab incisions are then made with a Bard Parker knife. So the lid incisions, as we discussed earlier, are placed in the lid, skin, and the orbicularis. And the brow incision is then made up to the frontalis muscle. Once these incisions are made, the needle is then passed in the suborbicularis plane from the central brow incision to the lateral brow incision. And this needle is then attached to a silicone rod. Now, as we had discussed in the preceding slide and the previous step, the needle which was attached to the silicone rod was passed from the central brow incision to the lateral brow incision. So now in the next step, the needle is then passed from the lateral brow incision to the lateral eyelid incision. And when the needle is passed through the eyelid incisions, the eyeball is protected with the help of a lid guard. The needle is then passed from the lateral eyelid incision to the middle eyelid incision. Following this, it is then passed through the middle brow incision. And finally, the needle is passed from the middle brow incision to the central brow incision. So basically, what we are doing here is we are passing the needle in a circumferential manner and completing a circle from the central brow incision to the lateral brow incision to the lateral eyelid incision, then the middle eyelid incision, the middle brow incision, and finally the central brow incision. So after the needle has been passed, the silicone sleeve is fed over to the ends of the silicone rod, which are brought out through the central brow incision. The eyelid height is then adjusted to the desired level by applying traction over each ends of the silicone rod. The silicone sleeve is transfixed to the subcutaneous tissue within the brow incision with 6-0 Prolene sutures. Following this, the individual wounds are closed with the help of interrupted 6-0 Prolene sutures. And lastly, a frost suture is placed through the eyelids before patching the eye. Now we move on to the complications of ptosis surgery. So there are various complications which can occur. Firstly, we will start with undercorrection. So the ptosis surgery has been performed, but the ptosis has not fully been corrected. And this is most frequent after congenital ptosis surgeries. This condition may improve as the lid edema subsides. So a wait and watch policy has to be followed. Even after the lid edema has subsided and there is persistent undercorrection, then in this situation it requires a repeat surgery. And this repeat surgery should be performed after 4 to 6 months if it is mild. Now, in cases where there is a severe undercorrection of the eyelid, then it has to be corrected immediately within a week or 2 weeks after surgery. The next complication is overcorrection. Now, overcorrection implies that the ptosis surgery has been performed and the height of the upper eyelid is more than expected. So, overcorrection is generally rare in congenital ptosis and mainly occurs when surgery is performed for acquired ptosis. So, the management of overcorrection is by applying downward traction over the eyelid with a forceps under local anesthesia. Now, the next complication which can occur is localized lid contour abnormalities. Following this, we have lid crease abnormalities. Now, a lid crease abnormality is when there is an absence of the lid crease, and this occurs due to improper positioning or overhanging of the skin. And the treatment for the lid crease abnormalities is that it may require reformation of the eyelid crease at the desired level. The fifth complication is conjunctival prolapse. Now, conjunctival prolapse may occur if the phonacial attachment of the levator is disturbed during dissection. Generally, conjunctival prolapse improves without treatment. If it does not improve, it may require fornix formation sutures, or the excess of the conjunctiva may have to be excised in some cases. The next complication following ptosis surgery is lag of thalamus. So, the cause of lag of thalamus is generally improper dissection of the levator aponeurosis from the surrounding structures. It can also occur due to over resection of the levator. Treatment of this condition is massage or levator recession. The next complication is exposure keratitis. This will occur due to overcorrection, lag of thalamus, decreased tear production, or due to a poor Bell's phenomenon. This can be treated with the help of artificial tear substitutes, punctal occlusion, or tarsorrhaphy. And lastly, we can have recurrence of ptosis following surgery, and this will require a resurgery.